Hello and welcome to this edition of Access Asia. Coming up, after last year's devastating bushfires, authorities were urged to prepare early in Australia. Our reporters take a look at how locals are fighting fire with fire. A regional rivalry rallies a writing revival. The ancient Mongol script is gaining popularity after controversial school reform in China. And Japan grapples with sexism in sumo wrestling. Ahead of the Summer Olympics, calls grow louder for women to be allowed to compete as professional athletes in the sport. Now, 2020 saw Australia suffer catastrophic bushfires. The main causes were a drought, hot and windy weather, and climate change. More than 18 million hectares of land were scorched, and the fires killed or displaced nearly 3 billion animals. Experts say the country should expect worse in the years to come. Richelle Harrison and Gregory Plesse take a look at how authorities are preparing.
Getting ready for the front line. These volunteer firefighters from Australia's Rural Fire Service are inspecting new equipment. Upgrades made possible thanks to a government cash injection and donations from members of the public who dug deep. Much-needed funds going towards new helmets and trucks like this one, with all the bells and whistles.
We know now what a catastrophic fire season we can expect in the future, and I'm sure that it'll be repeated. Hopefully we've learnt something, and we've probably got a lot more people with experience in what to do in these conditions.
The risk of future fires was at the heart of a public inquiry into the devastating fire season now known as Black Summer. The Royal Commission's final report made some 80 recommendations. Among them was better engagement with Australia's First Nations people when it comes to building resilience to natural disasters, encouraging authorities to incorporate Indigenous land management techniques that have been used for tens of thousands of years. Elwyn Toby is an Aboriginal fire practitioner and is demonstrating a cultural burn to a couple of local firefighters. Known as caring for country, these small-scale, low-intensity burns are said to minimise the risk of a blaze during bushfire season, while restoring connection to the land and rejuvenating the local environment.
The way we do it, you're not going to leave scars behind, because too intense fire, no grass grows for a long time. It's not really burning and scorching the land. We call it you're nurturing.
Indigenous fire practitioners are increasingly sought after by landowners, farmers and firefighters to share their traditional know-how.
Everyone benefits out of it. They get a learning process and we get a learning process off them of what they know. So it's two knowledges together.
But it's not enough to simply extinguish the flames. That was one of the warnings from the inquiry's report, which recognised a clear link between global warming and the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. The fires also destroyed some of the wettest forests on the planet, places that don't typically burn. For ecologists like Mark Graham, that should be enough to set off alarm bells.
A significant proportion of our society has definitely been fundamentally shaken, and their worldview and their attitude toward fire and carbon emissions and the like has shifted. But to me, it seems pretty clear that the wake-up call has not been heeded by enough people.
Critics accuse the Morrison government of not doing enough to tackle climate change. According to the Climate Transparency report released last November, Australia is failing in the fight against global warming, ranking among the worst of the G20 nations. With per capita carbon emissions 3 times the G20 average, it's one of the world's top polluters.
Our government is basically utterly beholden to the fossil fuel industries. It's incestuous, it's corrupt, and it's vile, and it's undoubtedly making our future much less safe because it's throwing fuel on the fire.
The government has downplayed any link between climate change and the bushfire crisis, which destroyed more than 18 million hectares and killed or displaced more than 3 billion animals. In the wake of the bushfire probe, climate scientists and fire chiefs insist the country must act now or risk more catastrophic fires in the future and lose ancient ecosystems like this one.
They're not really forests anymore. The structure of the forest is fundamentally altered, And it's going to take decades to maybe even centuries for recovery to occur because it has been so ferocious. This is a window into the future, and it's not pretty.
Australia still bears the scars of Black Summer, and yet it continues to defy international pressure to set more ambitious climate targets, proving perhaps that so far the country is yet to learn its lesson.
Well, the writing is on the wall in Mongolia. A growing number of people want to learn the ancient Mongol script. It comes after protests by their kinfolk in the Chinese autonomous region of Inner Mongolia. There, people were angry over reforms that would replace Mongolian with Mandarin in schools. Karis Garland has the story.
Dating back to the empire of Genghis Khan, the vertical Mongolian script is making a comeback. These Mongolians are among those who were inspired to learn the ancient letters after protests in China's Inner Mongolia region. The demonstrations were sparked at the end of August by reforms replacing Mongolian with Mandarin as the language of instruction in schools. This teacher started giving free lessons on the script after he saw coverage of the protests across the border.
People always cared for and respected the Mongolian script at the bottom of their hearts. But their love and respect completely spiked after the conflict in Inner Mongolia.
Inner Mongolia is an autonomous Chinese region home to an estimated 4.5 million ethnic Mongolians. Their plight to save the traditional Mongolian language has gained support from the neighbouring Mongolian government. Academics say the idea of ethnic Mongolians in China losing their identities is a cross-border issue.
The Inner Mongolians' fight isn't just a fight to use their native language. This is a fight to remain as Mongolian. This is a fight to preserve the Mongolian identity.
The script, also known as Hudum, was replaced in Mongolia by the Cyrillic alphabet in 1946. In a bid to preserve Hudum for the next generation, as well as connect ethnic Mongolians across Russia, China and Mongolia, tech developers are working to incorporate it in new apps and translators. This programmer is creating a social media platform similar to Facebook, where users can learn and download the vertical script.
Our communication has already shifted into digital. So to use the Mongolian script every day, there should be a place where the script exists in digital platforms. That's how we can save our script and our identity.
But there are challenges for those trying to preserve the script. Much of it uses archaic language unfamiliar to modern Mongolians, while there have also been grammar changes ushered in by the Cyrillic alphabet.
Now, as an amateur sumo wrestling champion in Japan, Hiyori Kon is used to taking on large opponents, but now she's facing her biggest one yet: sexism in one of the world's oldest sports. In Japan, women are still barred from competing professionally, but the athlete dubbed Little Miss Sumo is hoping to change that. Kathy Clifford has more.
Japan's most renowned sport, sumo wrestling has long been reserved for men. But more and more women are now throwing themselves into the 2,000-year-old tradition.
I didn't know that girls could be sumos.
This is an amateur tournament. Women are still unable to compete at a professional level. They're seen as impure within the Shinto religion, and the sacred national ring in Tokyo can only be entered by professional male wrestlers, worshipped across the country. But mentalities are slowly beginning to change. 21-year-old Hiyori is studying international relations. She's been practicing sumo wrestling since she was 6 years old. She's now training alongside men at one of the few universities to accept women into the sport.
When we step into the ring, we bow to one another. And then we must keep our bodies within the ring. If your body or your foot touches the ring, you lose.
Today, only one Japanese woman practices sumo wrestling for every 300 men.
People make judgments about women who sumo wrestle. I didn't notice at first, but these prejudices do exist.
People shouldn't believe that all female wrestlers are obese. Look at us, we're slim, but we're sumo wrestlers.
The club's trainer expects all members, male and female, to follow the same disciplines.
We don't differentiate between men and women. When they're in the ring, they're simply sumo wrestlers.
In Kyoto, Hiyori, Nagisa and Sayaka are saying final prayers before a competition at the weekend.
Even today, many schools don't accept girls into their sumo clubs. I was lucky to be able to practice up until university, so I feel a responsibility to change mentalities.
Since 1997, the Japanese Sumo Federation has begun adapting to demand for gender equality, accepting amateur tournaments for women like this one.
We created female sumo wrestling to allow it to be introduced to the Olympic Games. And you can see that it's getting more and more popular.
Sumo wrestling will be present at this summer's Olympic Games in Tokyo, but only as a demonstration sport, and without Hiyori, because women will still be barred from the ring.
And finally, Singapore is the first country in the world to serve lab-grown chicken products, currently on the menu at the restaurant 1880. The multi-course dinner includes chicken dishes from China, Brazil, and the United States. For years, researchers have been chasing the dream of lab-grown or cultured meats. The benefits include lower impact on the environment, eliminating certain hygiene risks, and more. Now, if you're curious, this is meant to be identical to normal chicken since it's made from genuine chicken cells. The only question is, are you too chicken to try it? Well, that's it for this edition. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned to France 24.